G'day folks, it's Phil from 15-Minute Guitar Practice here. How are you? Today we're going to be doing a very cool finger exercise. Now, officially, this finger exercise is called Diatonic Arpeggios. But if you have a problem with that language, because I remember that I certainly did, what we're doing is just playing the arpeggios from the chords in a key. So what we're going to do is play through them numerically and then apply them in a little more musical sense. And the thing with this exercise is, on the face of it, it just looks like another finger exercise, but in fact, it goes deeper than that, and I'll show you why and how in a moment. So let's run through them. There are 7 of them, obviously, because there are 7 chords in a key, and we are considering that we're using 4-note chords, so we'll be using 7th chords. So the order of chords in a key, the 1 chord is major 7, the 2 chord and the 3 chord are minor 7, the 4 chord is major 7, the 5 chord is dominant 7, the 6 chord is minor 7, and the 7 chord is minor 7 flat 5. So we're going to be playing the arpeggios related to each one of those in numerical order first. So the arpeggio for the 1 chord is a major 7 arpeggio, and it goes like this. We're going to be doing this in the key of A major. So it's 5 on the E string, 4 and 7 on the A, and 6 on the D. All of these arpeggios span 3 strings. Okay, the 2 chord is a minor 7 chord, so we're playing a minor 7 arpeggio starting at the 7th fret on the E string. So 7E, 5A, 4D, and 7D. The 3 chord is a minor 7 chord, and so we'll be playing a minor 7 arpeggio starting here on the 4th fret of the A string. It's going to be 4A and 7A, 6D, and then 4G. Next we have a major 7 arpeggio that fits with the 4 chord, and that is like this. So that's 5A, 4D, 7D, and 6G. Next we have the 5 chord, which is the dominant 7th chord in the key. Okay, the 5 chord is always a dominant 7th chord, and we're playing a dominant 7 arpeggio starting 7A. So 7A, 6D, 4G, and 7G. Next we go to the 6th chord. The 6th chord is a minor 7 chord, and so we'll play a minor 7 arpeggio starting here on the 4th fret of the D string. 4D, 7D, 6G, 5B. And then lastly we get to the 7, and I'm going to show you 2 variants of the 7. This one that's up where we're playing currently on the fretboard, and I'm going to show you the lower octave one as well. So the higher octave one is 6 on the D, 4 on the G, 7 on the G, and 7 on the B. So you have to do that kind of finger flattening thing to get that right. Okay, the lower version, an octave lower than that, it actually starts on the 4 of the E string, 4 and 7E, and then 5 on the A and 4 on the D. So you've got and. Okay, so those are each one of our arpeggios in our key. First of all, start by running through them numerically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And actually, I didn't show you the high version of the 1 chord, which is... That reminds me. Okay, so the higher version of the 1 chord is 7 on the G string. No, sorry, 7 on the D string, 6 on the G, 5 on the B, and 4 on the top E. And this one is unique in this exercise because it's the only one with 1 note on each string. So play 1 note gives you the arpeggio, but play gives you the major 7 chord. So that's the same as the one we started with. Okay, so you've been playing them through 1 to 7 and you're comfortable. Now we can play them a bit more musically. For example, let's do 1, 4, 2, 5. The great thing about this exercise is it's actual usable pieces. You know, arpeggios are great for playing in solos and other places, so this is usable fragments. Another one, once you're comfortable with 1, 4, 2, 5, let's introduce some of the minors in there. So let's go 2, no, let's do 3, 6, 2, 7. So that's the exercise, and you can play it in various different ways to improve your dexterity. But what about this other layer I talked about earlier? Well, one of the most striking things I found when I first discovered this exercise was I started to notice connections between chords, arpeggios, and stuff I was doing. So, for example, if you look at the 1, the 3, the 5 and the 7 chord arpeggios, you'll notice that each one is 3/4 of the previous one. So let's take the 1 chord. The 1 chord major 7 arpeggio is this. If you take the 2nd, 3rd and 4th notes of that, you've actually got the start of the 3 chord arpeggio. So most of the 1 chord arpeggio, in fact 3/4 of it, is contained within the 3 chord arpeggio. And if you look at the 5 chord arpeggio, the dominant 7 arpeggio, and compare it to the minor 7 arpeggio from the 3 chord, there's the minor 7 arpeggio, and there's a dominant 7 arpeggio. You can see that the 2nd, 3rd and 4th note for the 3 chord arpeggio, not that one, but that one and that one, actually form the first 3 notes of the 5 chord arpeggio. All the way through, there's the 7, and then onwards and onwards and onwards. So the 1, the 3, the 5 and the 7 are all connected. Similarly, the 2, the 4, the 6 and the 1 have that same thing happening. Here's the 2. Here is the 4. As you can see, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th note of the 2 chord arpeggio, the minor 7, becomes the first 3 notes of the 4 chord major 7 arpeggio. Okay, so the 2, the 4, the 6, and the high 1 are all 3/4 of each other. So I found that very interesting. I also learnt this through looking at the shapes rather than like tab and frets, just looking at the shapes. I'll pop the shapes in a PDF and the tab as well, but it's the shape recognition. And what I recognized about these shapes is because the arpeggios fall over 3 strings, what tends to happen is you've either got something at the beginning and then a kind of diagonal cross the strings, or a diagonal across the strings and then something at the end. So for example, the 2 chord, we've got a diagonal across the strings and then something at the end, meaning a kind of horizontal thing on the same string. So diagonal, 7E, 5A and 4D, and then the horizontal bit, which is the next note, the 7 on the D. So that's kind of like diagonal and then along. Whereas if you look at the 7, the low 7 that we did, it's along first and then diagonal. There's the horizontal bit, 4, 7 on the E, and then the diagonal, 7, 5 and 4 on the E, A and D. So have a look at this. This is a really interesting way to help you make connections between the different arpeggios. And you might say, okay, so what if the 3 is related to the 1 and the 5? How does that help me? Well, if you need to play some lead melodies over a major 7 chord, most people would just think, oh, I can play a major 7 arpeggio, right? So if you're playing over an A7 arpeggio, you probably, major 7, sorry. You probably do that. But actually, you could start there. You could play the 3 chord arpeggio and the do, 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 do. That's the dominant 7th arpeggio, and that gives a different kind of colour, but still musically correct. The do, 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 do. That's not the major 7 arpeggio. It's actually the minor 7 arpeggio starting on the 3, but it still brings out the quality of that major 7 chord. So that's how it can help you. Now, one last thing before I go is the picking pattern of these is tricky to do if you just do the whole thing alternate picking. I spent a long time when I first learned this missing strings because of my pick strokes, and the changing strings made it pretty complicated. So what I'd like to do is just share with you what I do for each of these arpeggios in terms of my pick direction. So the arpeggio for the 1 chord, I alternate pick all of that. The arpeggio for the 2 chord, I sweep pick 3 downstrokes and then 1 up. Let's assume that we're just doing an ascending version, so stopping there. Okay, so alternate pick for the 1 chord, 3 down picks and an up pick for the 2 chord. For the 3 chord, I alt pick all of it. 4 chord, I also alternate pick. The 5 chord, again, 3 sweeps with downstroke and an upstroke. Down, 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 up. The 6 chord, I alternate pick. And where's the 6? Don't know why I had to ask myself. The 6 chord, I alternate pick. And the 7th chord, I also alternate pick. And the 8th, or the repeat of the 1 higher up, I sweep. Down, 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 down. Depends what's going to happen after that top note. Because I may have to adjust that 4-string sweep if there's something happening on another string that's not the top E. Because I would have ended with a downstroke on the underside of that top E string, but then I may have needed to jump back over those strings to a note on, say, the B string, And so in that instance, I would probably refinger that. So that's a picking rule of thumb just to do with playing these arpeggios. If you're playing them in the context of playing an arpeggio and then playing other notes, it really depends where the other notes are and on what string. Okay, quite a lengthy one. Be sure to download the PDF and look at the shapes. It's really useful. It's very musical, and I found it quite an eye-opener in terms of helping me understand the connection between other arpeggios and chords. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. Give me a thumbs up if this made sense. I hope it did, and I will see you in the next one. So this is Phil from 15 Minute Guitar Practice saying bye for now. Cheers.